Hello again. In this second episode, we'll explore the ideas behind our conversation canvassing method. It's derived from a proven strategy called deep canvassing. What does that mean? We'll start with the definition we learned from our own trainers, who were members of the grassroots movement and national organization known as Indivisible. Here's one definition. Deep canvassing is a voter outreach method that centers candid, two-way conversations where canvassers ask voters to share their relevant, emotionally significant experiences and reflect on them aloud. This formulation comes from People's Action, a national social justice organizing group that's applied the strategy extensively. Here's another way to describe it, and we'll have Harrison read this one as he alerted us to the work of Eitan Hirsch.
In deep canvassing, volunteers focus on being good listeners and on making a human connection to someone they might disagree with. They are emissaries for one party or a belief system or a position to another, looking for goodwill.
This comes, as I said, from Eitan Hirsch, who's a political scientist at Tufts and has studied the distinction between political engagement as a kind of hobby and as action that makes a difference. Here's one more definition from this man, David Fleischer. He's the person credited with inventing this method around 2008. As an activist working for LGBTQ+ rights in California, he was looking for a way to humanize the issue, to talk to people who opposed gay marriage face to face as a real, respectful, and vulnerable person with his own personal story.
Consider what it would be like if deep canvassing became a normal part of American politics. If more of us and if more campaigns more often went outside of our bubble. That's the vision we find compelling at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, because from doing this work, what we know is people can change, we can help them change. And that means that the total amount of prejudice in American society is not fixed and not inevitable. Maybe prejudice itself is not inevitable.
The Marriage Equality Campaign was the first to engage in the conversation canvassing method, but it's been used in all kinds of social justice campaigns since then. LGBTQ+ rights, reproductive rights, universal health care access, immigration rights, and more. In Dave Fleischer's view, those all share a unifying theme. You know what issue we're canvassing on? He asks. It's love. He goes on to admit it sounds corny, but he insists we are showing voters love when we canvass. We're trying to teach them that voting is a gift we give people we love. So love may be the bottom line, but the variety of issue campaigns points to the fact that there can be many applications. There's no single way to do deep conversation canvassing. It might be as simple as the way you approach talking with your neighbor. I had this experience at a summer cocktail party hosted by my neighbor who voted for Trump. A deep canvass might mean deciding to talk with a group of people on an issue over time. One of my other neighbors recently did a version of this, engaging others in an effort to reduce speeding on our road. Deep canvassing is also used to find out people's feelings on a specific issue. Planned Parenthood has done neighborhood canvassing, for example, on reproductive health. And then there's our kind of campaign. Our campaign is that last kind, visiting a targeted list with specific talking points for a conversation, with the emphasis on listening and engagement. Conversation canvassing has only been used systematically in partisan political campaigns in the last 5 years or so. It's attracted the attention of political science researchers who found that deep canvassing can be more effective than conventional transactional canvassing. That's the kind where we're checking boxes to get data, following a tight script, and moving as fast as possible to cover a lot of people. The higher impact of deep canvassing is there, whether the conversation is at doors or by phone, though door-to-door is better. Now, checklist campaigning is appropriate for the intensive get out the vote period, when we're seeking to get our candidate's supporters to the polls. But it's not as good for building that sustained architecture of engagement. In the less intense periods, years without elections or the season before coordinated campaigns begin, conversation canvassing can make a difference. Eitan Hersh, that political scientist, says, in fact, it's possibly the most successful mode of political persuasion ever measured. So let's look quickly at some of those research findings. This graph shows results from a canvass on immigration, talking with people at doors about the dreamers brought to the US as children. Should those undocumented youth get attorneys, have a path to legal status, get to stay in the US, and live free of fear? We won't get into the details here, but look at the bars on the graph. Yellow for deep canvas with conversation, green for the traditional style, just asking the questions. People who had a conversation were 4 to 6% more likely to agree that undocumented youth should have these rights. When researchers conducted follow-up, they found that people's opinions were durable. People reported holding the same views 3 to 6 months later. Here's another example. A group called Changing the Conversation, or CTC, organized in 2018 in Staten Island as an independent volunteer-run organization not affiliated with any party. They work on electoral campaigns, but they say their mission beyond any specific race is to help grow an electorate that embraces compassion and inclusion. Their pilot project in 2018 helped flip Staten Island's seat to a Democrat, Max Rose, for the first time in 40 years. Here's a clip from a news report on that campaign.
There's a confirmation bias out there within the worlds of politics that persuasion is not worth it, but I think the vast majority of people are decent human beings and care about other human beings. And I feel like if we can't figure out how to build a commonality around that, how are we ever going to build a better political future for ourselves?
Then came 2020. CTC worked in 4 Pennsylvania counties with months of deep canvassing followed by traditional get out the vote door knocking. The graph shows the impact on voter turnout, which was high in any case. In this area of the country, 70% overall for this critical national election. That's the bar on the right. CTC's conventional GOTV interaction was effective. The middle bar shows it made people 8% more likely to vote than having no contact. Canvassing with conversations, the left-hand bar, made it 17% more likely that residents would vote. And there was one more really important finding from this 2020 canvassing effort in Philadelphia and surrounding counties. Impact was strongest among infrequent voters, people who had not voted in the 3 previous presidential elections. For those most disaffected voters, talking with a CTC volunteer boosted the likelihood they'd vote by 29%. In other words, the less often a person voted in the past, the greater the impact of a deep canvassing conversation. In 2024, CTC canvassed in West Philadelphia with even better results, even though overall voter turnout was lower. 80% of those who had a deep canvassing conversation voted, compared with 58% who did not. That's a 22% boost to voting. Now, we know that active voter suppression has long been a major strategy on the right. Here's what CTC's April 21st report had to say about that. They wrote, "The Republican Party is working quickly to make voting more difficult, but truly motivated voters will ultimately find a way." The data makes clear that deep canvassing holds special promise for reaching and mobilizing those currently left behind by our democracy, and too often by democratic politics. Our work helps people connect their vision of the world as it should be with the act of voting. We help people who rarely vote convince themselves that they must. I've given you a lot of theory here, so this will be a good time to stop. You may want to reflect on how these ideas relate to your own experiences with politics, with your life at work, with your neighbors, your friends, your family. Next time, we'll talk about how to have these conversations. And sneak peek, the key will be listening and speaking with empathy. I look forward to moving on to that topic, so I'll see you for episode 3.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, fascists, you may be surprised. People in this world are getting organized. You're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. I said, all you fascists bound to lose. Yes, sir. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. There's people of every nation marching side by side, marching across the fields where 1 million fascists died. You're bound to lose.